And welcome to this very special webcast from AccountingWeb, CFOs Going Global, the Challenges of International Expansion. My name is Francois Badenhorst. I'm the business editor of AccountingWeb. Welcome to my viewers and welcome to my two esteemed guests. We have David Turner, Senior Director of Oracle NetSuite, and to his right is Tim Amy, the Group Financial Controller of Western Global. Welcome, gents. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just before we start anything, let's get to housekeeping so we can move on quickly. So all the sessions will be available on demand. If there's any technical issues, don't worry, so you can access it afterwards. But if you do have any problems, please just contact campaigns@accountingweb.co.uk. Pardon, my memory is failing me. Questions. This is an interactive session, so please do ask them. There should be a chat window next to the video player. I have my iPad here, and we will have a section at the end where we will be asking the guests any questions that you might have, any burning questions. If there's any questions that can't be addressed because of time, we will be getting to them afterwards as well, so don't worry. So just the agenda, so there'll be a couple of key themes, the benefits and practicalities of how we can deal with these things. So why expand internationally, KPIs and metrics, partnerships, tax and compliance, and the aforementioned Q&A, and then a key takeaway at the end. So just before we get going, guys, so just in your own words, Tim, could you just tell me a little bit about yourself and your experience?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Tim Amy. I'm the Global Financial Controller for a business called Western Global. For those who don't know, Western Global designs and sells steel double-bonded fuel tanks that stores diesel and aviation fuel. We sell tanks that range from 1,000 litres all the way up to 100,000 litres. You'll find our smaller tanks sort of connected to generators at festivals or on construction sites. And then you'll find our larger tanks. What we can do is we connect them all together to create like a fuel farm. And we sell those in remote areas such as greenfield mining sites. Western Global as a business is headquartered in Yate, which is just outside Bristol. We have subsidiaries in the US, in Canada, in Poland, the Middle East and South Africa. And then we have distributors in over 30 countries. And the business has grown 30% sort of year on year for the last 3 years, and the majority of that has come from international growth.
And David, returning champion to the webcast, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit tell the audience about yourself a little bit?
Sure, yeah. So I'm David Turner. I head up marketing for NetSuite in EMEA. NetSuite is one of the original cloud software companies. We provide a system that runs your whole business, right from finance, accounting, and in the back office, right through to CRM, operational systems, and e-commerce. And we particularly target small and medium-sized companies, and in particular companies that are growing fast and growing internationally.
Yeah, and I understand NetSuite has also been going through a bit of growth itself.
Yeah, absolutely. We were acquired by Oracle just over 18 months ago, and since then we've been expanding at a huge rate. I describe it as like working for $1 billion startup. So here in EMEA, for example, we've gone from just a few hundred people in the UK to now having around 900 people in 15 countries in the last 18 months. So we kind of feel the pain. We understand what our fast-growing scale-up customers are going through.
Yeah, so again, I'm just going to emphasize that this is an interactive session, guys, so please, if you have any questions as they occur, just fire them into the chat window and I will get them answered for you. So let's get into the meat of the discussion here today. So why expand internationally? So you can never accuse us of asking serious existential questions. So guys, I'll just get going for you now. Tim, why? Why is Western Global looked abroad?
Sure. So Western Global was established in 1962 in the UK. It's been operating in the UK market for over 50 years. Our product is pretty well known. You'll find us on most construction sites in the UK. And as a result of that, there's limited additional opportunities for us to target. So in order for us to grow the business, we then need to look into international markets. As well, when you look at the UK, the size of the UK, the international markets actually offer much bigger opportunities for us as well.
Was it a case of like you could have grown in the UK but it would have been slower, or was it simply a case of you just simply had to look abroad to find that opportunity for like real growth?
I think when effectively it's a mature market, everybody knows our product, so there's not really that much growth to go at. And the other thing for our business is product availability. So you need product availability for your customers to then have it straight away. We have third-party manufacturers, so in order for us to get a constant supply from them, we need to deliver constant revenue to them, and the only way we can deliver constant revenue is to grow the business. So international expansion has been key for us to really set up and establish our supply chain.
Yeah, I mean, and David, I'll be keen to bring you in here, especially because you've mentioned supporting businesses expanding internationally. What kind of tools are necessary when you talk about making a real go at going overseas?
Yeah, well, what we find with companies is usually when they start off and they're just in one country and growing the business, it's very easy to have relatively simple systems and processes. You can have a basic accounting package. You might have a CRM package to manage your customers. You might have some operational systems, but because you're in one country, one currency, one jurisdiction, the business is relatively straightforward. As soon as you go internationally, you instantly bring in complexity, and in every country you add, you're increasing that complexity manyfold. So what often happens is people may start in a second country with a local system, and then put another system in, and then they'll find very quickly that they can't get visibility across the business. They don't know what's happening in those other locations. It takes them a long time to consolidate accounts at the end of the month. And the complexity, can really bring the business down and make it very, very difficult for them to keep control. Yeah. So ideally what you want is a single system that can run across your business wherever you are in the world, give you that ability to have a consolidated view across the business, but also, cope with local compliance and currency and taxation requirements and all of that complexity that every country is going to have. Yeah.
What's your perspective on this, Tim?
So we use NetSuite, so all of our subsidiaries have the same system, and it's a fantastic tool for me. I can see I've got great visibility of how each of the business units are performing on a daily basis. I can see what quotes are going out, what sales orders are coming in. I can drill down to the point where I can actually see the number of phone calls my collections clerk has made in America. It's a great tool for me just to have a nose about what's going on, and the information is real time, so there shouldn't really be any surprises at month end because I can see all the numbers that are coming through, and it's a great business tool for the business to make informed decisions.
Yeah. In terms of, we're really going to sort of drill into the KPI metric sides of it in the next segment, but I suppose just from a more upper level, in terms of getting all that detail and all the oversight you have with a tool like NetSuite or like any kind of cloud suite, how do you sort of avoid being overwhelmed by all the information? Like, is there a way for you to kind of deal with that flow of information?
So I'm an accountant, and I actually spent some time doing due diligence, so I really, really like the detail. Yeah. So I'm more than happy just to drill down and see what the true picture is. As soon as you start aggregating and moving into consolidated numbers, you start to lose the detail, and it can hide or mask trends. That can be deliberate, it can be undeliberate, but if you have that granular level of detail, you can really drill down and see what's really happening in the business. And that just means if there's issues, as a management team, you can then address those and be proactive, rather than issues happening and then it gets to a point where it's very difficult to unwind it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to forget when you're using a single system like you are, that if you have multiple systems, especially in multiple countries, things like consolidation, month-end close just become a complete nightmare. And the more subsidiaries you've got, the more countries you're in, the more complex that gets. I was at a retailer recently, quite a well-known high street retailer, that was in 7 countries and had 7 different accounting systems in those countries, and they literally, to do month end, the controller had to sit in a room with 7 different PCs running those different systems and then manually consolidate. Yeah. It took them 3 to 4 weeks to close the books, which meant they never really had much time to actually analyse the detail. And and he said that he, in one of the countries particularly, he had his level of confidence of the figures he was getting was, within a tolerance of $1 million or a few $1 million, which was quite frightening, really.
Yeah, and in terms of like trend spotting, I suppose like it's extremely important for you because I mean you're not there in person. It sounds like a very elementary observation, but I mean like that is the case. You are like a central location trying to keep an eye on everything.
Yeah, and the problem with consolidated view of, or summarised view of data is you sometimes miss those trends. You can't, because every country will have its own specific nuances, and if you can't drill down and look at the different trends that are happening there, you're going to miss them.
Yeah. I teased it a little bit earlier in the segment, so KPIs and metrics, which is obviously a fabulously nerdy segment for us all to get into. Basically, we talked at a very kind of superficial level about how you monitor these things, but then in terms of actual KPIs and metrics, what are some actual examples of things that you can really keep a close eye on, Tim?
So again, another fantastic thing from NetSuite is I have my home screen and it has little dashboards of key things that I'm monitoring every day. So I'll see every single sales order that is generated that day by the business, or I can view it by week or by month. So I then know what my backlog is doing, and I know sort of generally where my revenue is going to be for this month, for next month, for the month after. So that should, hopefully, touch wood, mean that there are no surprises along the way. The other key thing for us, our business, is to monitor inventory levels. We have a global supply chain, so we have to move inventory from China, from India, from Eastern Europe. So you need to keep on top of your inventory levels, and you need to understand, what the demand is, what the sales are driving, and then the other thing for us is cash flow. I need to know that my team are on top of their cash collections, so that they're bringing cash into the business. Because certainly as our business has scaled, because we need stock on the ground in our locations, it's a big working capital draw. So cash for our business is really key to grow. So it's vital for our business.
And David, I mean, from your perspective here, not only as like from NetSuite's perspective as a company that's expanding internationally quite quickly itself, but in terms of like your customers and then the work that you do with these multiple different businesses, what are some examples here of important information to keep an eye on, and how does it kind of affect your ambitions to expand globally?
Well, Tim touched on cash, and every expanding company, that's critical. Of course, cash is critical for any business, but when you're expanding, you've got to be really careful that you're keeping an eye on where the cash is, making sure that your credit control teams are keeping on top of that, and it's in the right place at the right time, because otherwise you can hit real serious problems. So there's a number of basic, I think, financial measures that most accountants would recognise that are absolutely critical. But I think there's also going to be other measures that are particular to the business. So Tim mentioned some that are specific to his business. In our business, for example, as a software company, you're looking at things like how long it's taking to get your customers live, what your churn rate is, how many customers are you losing versus how many you're gaining, and so on. And obviously, those sort of measures are critical to your ongoing success, and you want to be looking at that by country, because you need to pick up if there's a problem in one country that means that you're losing customers much faster in one rate, or it's product returns or quality issues if you're in manufacturing or in retail, those sort of things. So there's going to be key measures that everybody in their specific business will kind of recognise. And again, Tim talked about having that dashboard, and typically you'll find people in the business will have those KPIs in front of them on the dashboard, so they can keep monitoring them and monitor them by country.
It's literally daily, so it's not something you then look at the end of the month. You can view it real time, which is a great tool for me.
Yeah, that's a very critical point, and it's something that I have noticed in conversations. I mean, in terms of KPIs, not just being something that's like a thing you just wheel out at like a monthly meeting. It's a constant real time thing. To what extent is that true for you guys?
So I literally monitor it daily. I have weekly cash calls, so I know, and as I said, I know the activity that's been happening. by having a weekly cash call and going through my accounts receivable balances, if there are any issues with customers, I can then speak to my general managers in the subsidiaries and say, look, we're having some problems with collections. Can we then get the salespeople to support my credit control? If I wait until the end of the month, that is potentially another 3 weeks when we're not going to be getting our cash in from our customers. Yeah. So it's critical for the business.
Yeah, and for like a capital-intensive business like you guys, I think that's super important.
Yeah.
From like I suppose now, like Tim's view is obviously influenced by the fact that like Western Global is this, like you make something as a very intensive, but from like a software perspective, as like a company like NetSuite, what are we talking about there in terms of why is cash flow important for you guys in that sense?
Well, at the end of the day, obviously, we have software, but actually we're a people business. So, it's all about people. The people that are developing the product, the people that are out there selling it, supporting it, implementing it. So therefore, our salary bill is, I don't know, it's at least 80% of our cost, I think, like a lot of services-based companies. So, it's absolutely critical that we can, pay the bills at the end of the month. And all of that, so I think, you're either paying people or you're paying for stuff if you're making it. So cash is always going to be.
What's that mix for Western Global in terms of paying for people and paying for stuff, as David put it?
So the majority of our spend is on our materials.
Yeah.
We actually run quite a lean organisation, so it's our material costs. We can go on supply chain sort of shortly, but we have some suppliers where we have 7-day credit terms, so we have to pay them immediately.
Wow.
And that's our biggest cost. So we have to then manage that cash flow, because potentially we get the goods, they then get shipped halfway across the world, and they then sit in our warehouse in the US and then go to a customer. And that working capital cycle can be 4 to 5 months before we've already paid for the goods until we then get the cash in from our customer. So,
and then I guess from in terms of operating in these disparate territories, consolidating and reconciling data from overseas, how simple is that? Because I mean, you get it from these different locations. How easy is it for you to bring these things in?
How do you find it?
To be fair, it should just be a click of a button.
Yeah.
Literally that simple. Because everyone's using the same system and all the information is there. Click of a button. Once they've done their month-end close, the consolidation should happen. Click of a button. Ours, we've got a little bit of work to do, but it's a spreadsheet that takes a couple of hours to do.
Yeah.
We don't need 7 computers all lined up to then pull all the numbers together.
That's a bit of a nightmare, I'm gonna lie.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to sort of give another view. I mean, obviously it should be that simple, but also you've got to remember that software is not the only solution. In that there are people behind that and there are processes, and if people aren't inputting their expenses on time or inputting sales orders quick enough and all of that, then however good and consolidated the software is, you're going to have issues. So a business is kind of about systems, processes and people. Yeah, systems is really important. We would obviously believe that, but you've also got to make sure behind that you've got the processes and you've got people who are disciplined enough, or you're able to check up on them enough that they are doing what they need to do. So all those elements are important. But of course, having that single system does give the ability to check with the systems, the processes that are happening, and check what the people are doing. So it is useful.
Yeah.
The other thing as well is, so as well as using NetSuite, we use a lot of collaboration tools such as SharePoint, OneDrive. So all the working papers are all stored in one place. Yeah. So again, I can access all the working papers that then feed in the information into the actual numbers, and it's available to everyone in my finance team. So again, that makes my life so much easier. I don't have to send emails and only get half the picture. I can see all the things that they're working on for month end.
Yeah. In terms of, it's a classic dilemma, but sort of communicating these KPIs to not just your finance team, but all the stakeholders in the business. How do you find that element of it in terms of dealing with management or dealing with because Western Global is privately owned, I understand.
So we report monthly, but in terms of we have subsidiaries that are based around the world. So how do you get everybody to feel like they're contributing and going in one direction? So we're quite open as a business in terms of how the business is performing to the rest of the group. we have some healthy competition where at the end of each month, the North American region knows how many sales they've done compared to the UK region. There's always like, at the end of the month, we're raising either the UK flag or the USA flag. Yeah. So it means that everyone's pulling in the right direction and feels sort of like included, which I think is important when you have subsidiaries that are spread all around the world, that they also know that they're not just like their isolated business, they're part of a wider group.
Yeah. Interesting stuff.
Yeah, I think actually it sort of touches on an interesting area, which may be outside of systems and processes really, but the whole cultural element of expansion. So one of the things we're finding at NetSuite as we grow at this massive rate is one of our struggles is, we're constantly trying to attract and retain people. Yeah. Attracting talent is always one of the biggest issues that all startups and scale-ups struggle with. And, and maintaining that culture that you started with when you're expanding at that huge rate and you've got all these, people in remote locations is a real struggle. And again, tools can help with that, things like collaboration tools and communications tools, but it's also about making sure the management team is really focused on maintaining culture, communicating, making sure everyone's aligned in terms of their objectives, making sure they understand the vision of the company, what it is you're all trying to achieve. Yeah. And then how that filters down to you as an individual wherever you are in the company. That's really important as well.
We have a quarterly newsletter that goes out to everybody in the business that tells about what's been going on in the various regions, new joiners, marriages, births. I mean, obviously we can't do that on the scale of you, but because there'd be way too many pages if we're getting 600 new people a year. But again, it's a nice way for everybody to feel involved and they're part of a bigger organisation.
So just conscious of time, so we're gonna swiftly move on to the next segment, which is partnerships and supply chain management, which is of course an absolutely critical aspect of expanding internationally. So let's talk partnerships then, guys. So I'll open this up to both of you. So how do you find the right people to partner with, and what are the benefits of finding that perfect kind of partner in an international location? Who wants to take it first?
Yeah, I can go. So we've got 30 distributors. We've got distributors in 30 countries. So I think we've probably got more like 35, 36 distributors. And the way that we sort of like try and pick them is that they're already a distributor for other products that are complementary. So we can just effectively like put our products in with their products, and then it's just an extra sell for their salespeople. The benefits of having distributors are, you can suddenly get access to a completely new market, and there's no capital outlay on rents. You don't have to employ people. You don't have to deal with any of the compliance issues with payroll, with taxes. And the other thing, again, we keep on coming back to cash. I don't have to worry about cash collection because I'm just sending all my stuff to one distributor who's selling to various customers in the region, but I know he's good to pay me on sensible terms. And it's a really good way to actually test a market there, to really see if your product is going to do well in that market. Sort of like how we grew in the US is we sort of took our designs out to the US, and it was run there sort of like a distributor, and then it was so successful that we ended up sort of buying the business.
Yeah, very similar actually. So I think NetSuite's grown by first using channel partners. So when I mentioned 18 months ago or so, we were just in the UK, but we had channel partners, distributors across pretty much all of EMEA, and that has enabled us to get a footprint in all those countries. So whenever we go into a new country, we're not looking for our first customer. There's already customers there, and the market has been started to some extent. And then what's important for us is that the partners don't then think that we're coming and taking away their market when we move into their country. Actually, what we're doing is expanding the market for everybody. Yeah. The great thing with a product like ours is actually any small, medium-sized company is a target really. So every country has got thousands and thousands of potential customers. So if we come into when we arrive in France or Germany and expand, that should also expand the market for our local distributors who are already there. So it's sort of it benefits everyone. But I think, and what you said is absolutely right. When you're looking for that right partner, it's typically finding someone who's already in your market, but with maybe a complementary product or service. Sometimes we do partner with people who have actually competing products, but often they might be selling a traditional product rather than a cloud product, which ours is. So they're looking for a sort of more modern alternative. You know, so we sometimes do that, but typically we're looking for people who are really committed to, you know, our product, because you need to know, even though you're not necessarily, well, you know, you're still expending resources on training a partner and you know, committing to supporting them. So you want to know they're going to be fighting for you.
It's quite interesting you say about having a committed partner. So obviously, when you sort of sign those initial agreements, they are very, very committed, and a lot of our partners, when we first approach them, want an exclusivity agreement for that region. But once they've got it, there's no incentive for them to sell your product. So it's quite key to sort of like set down some targets for them to achieve. And then also, you know, at the end of a certain time period, just you were able to walk away if it's not working. And that's sort of like what we've been learning along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're going to give exclusivity to a territory, then the partner has to commit to certain targets. Otherwise, you know, they can just sit there and twiddle their thumbs and sell the occasional deal when it falls in their lap, and you're not getting any real kind of boost to your business.
No, and then if you're spending all that money building your brand and that awareness, effectively they're doing nothing, and like you say, stuff can just fall into their lap with them not really doing anything. It's
supply chain is obviously especially critical for you guys because again you have a manufacturing element to the company. So managing that, you've already mentioned you have this sort of like interesting distributed supply chain model.
So we don't do any manufacturing ourselves. We use third-party steel fabricators across the globe, which is great because we don't have any capital outlays. So it's, you know, there's no operating costs, but we are sort of a little bit reliant on our suppliers because and we spent a lot of time developing our global supply chain so it can give us flexibility to sort of ramp up or slow down demand depending on how many sales orders that we've got.
Nice.
One of the things when you have global suppliers in places for China, for instance, we spent a lot of time sort of creating checklists, procedures and policies for them to go through to ensure that the tanks were of a certain quality, and also have people on the ground there just to make sure that they're following those, because what you don't want is you don't want your tanks to sort of be leaving China, travel all the way across the world, you incur all these freight fees, all of these fees to sort of get them through customs, it then gets to your subsidiary. Then you then sell it to a customer, it then goes to the customer, and all of a sudden, like 4 months have elapsed, and the customer turns around and goes, well, I've got a faulty product. It's quite hard to then remedy that. So, you know, the business has really focused on its supply chain over a number of years to make sure that those issues don't happen, essentially.
You mentioned that they're the sort of like the person on the ground in places like China. How important is that, and how did you identify that kind of partner? Because, like you say, that's so critical in terms of
and it's one of those cultural things that you work to a timetable and you go, well, you know, these tanks are going to be delivered by this point, and customers are then expecting it to then come at a certain time. What we find culturally in China, if you keep asking them, is things on track and on time to be delivered, and then they're like, yep, and it comes to the delivery time. And then we go, has it been loaded onto the ship? And they're like, oh no, it's going to be another month. So it's really key to have somebody on the ground just to make sure that the production schedule is going as planned. And you know, we just found like there are sort of like quality control people that are available to Western businesses that can then go in and do that. The other thing as well is about supply chain is when you've got a global supply chain, you've just got to realise that there are things that are out of your control. So things like if there is a typhoon on the outskirts of China, potentially all the ships could be not allowed to sail for 2 weeks. So you just need to sort of factor that in when you're speaking to your customers. Just go, look, we'll do everything we can to get it on time, but there are certain circumstances that are beyond our control.
Like typhoons.
Very,
very much so. So you can't control. Can NetSuite help with typhoons?
No, unfortunately, it's one thing we can't control. Absolutely. We work with a lot of product-based companies and manufacturers, and you know, like Western Global, that a lot of them are choosing to outsource. But we're also seeing companies, you know, actually going for different models. So some of them are bringing that stuff back onshore, you know, for quality purposes or for that speed of response. So, like in the Netherlands, we have a company called Secrid who do wallets. They've chosen to manufacture them all in the Netherlands, even though it's obviously not a low-cost location, but it allows them to maintain quality and control, and obviously that ability to flex very quickly and pivot the business. Other people are using, say, markets in Eastern Europe that aren't quite as far away as China. And then we've got customers who are doing that, but actually, for example, choosing to own their own facilities. So Buster and Punch, who make very high kind of quality light fittings and home furnishing sort of fittings, really very design-led, beautiful products. And they were manufactured in China, but they actually chose to own their operations. So they've gone out there and set it up so that they absolutely have control over that, the quality, the timing, and I guess to some extent the things like the intellectual property as well, kind of side of it. They've chosen to own it and then deliver it into the West. Yeah.
So, but I mean, just to reiterate, the beauty of the model for you guys is the sort of low expenditure element of it. Or?
It certainly means we can be competitive on a global scale, and it just means that we have a completely flexible supply chain that we can turn off and on to react to demand. And from a business perspective, we don't have those operating costs and the capex costs associated, so it works well for us.
Yeah, and just before we move on, I suppose it's a classic partnership that any business has with the bank.
Yeah.
In terms of what kind of support you needed for Western Global from your bank, what can you tell us about that?
So obviously we've spoken about cash quite a lot. So dealing with sort of multiple currencies, so we have a multi-currency overdraft, which is quite useful. We also have the facility where we get the interbank FX rates when we're moving money, which is really important.
Yeah.
We have an uncommitted facility, so we do occasionally work on large projects that can be based anywhere in the world. And one of the requisites for some of those large projects is that you need a tender bond.
Yeah.
So we have like an uncommitted facility that at short notice we can just create a tender bond that accompanies our tenders. It's quite interesting. A few tenders recently that we've been applying for, you've actually had to hand deliver the tenders in person. So we spend all this time preparing like a tender document, and then we get all the guarantees in place, and then it's like, right, how do we actually physically get it to somewhere in the Middle East?
Yeah.
So
you're delivering, not the cash.
No. So you're delivering your tender document.
Right.
Like you're literally like a 40-page specification sheet,
wow.
and then you're like tender bond, which is just a bit of paper saying our bank, or sometimes you have to do a local partner bank will guarantee this tender bond, and then on a Friday afternoon somebody is potentially on standby that they might have to go to the airport on Sunday to fly in with this envelope to then hand a contract in, hand the tender in person.
Yeah.
Which is, that's one of the fun parts about dealing internationally.
Yeah. Well, it's all the challenges that come with it. Yeah. So just jumping ahead now to our next segment, which is tax and compliance, which is of course an accounting web classic. So, just let's move straight into it, guys. So, Tim, what are the tax code and compliance issues of going overseas? I'm sure there's many.
Yeah, so working in multiple jurisdictions, as David mentioned earlier, and dealing with multiple taxes does make the business fairly complicated. So we have a Polish subsidiary, and the Polish tax laws are very prescriptive to the point where when you're signing official documents, it needs to be in a blue pen, not a black pen. Otherwise, they don't accept it.
Well.
And you can't. We pay quite a lot of advice for our tax compliance in those countries. In Poland, if you're not compliant, they can actually come down and close your facility. So there's big repercussions if you get it wrong. The other thing as well is if from a sales tax perspective, if you get it wrong and then you go into an audit, the government can hold on to your money for significant periods of time. So when you're paying a 23% tax rate on your supplies, and then you're waiting to get refunded from the Polish government, puts quite a burden on your cash flow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, tax is always the challenge when you're expanding internationally. Every jurisdiction is different.
Yeah.
And I think every company that's done that has their challenges. We have tried to kind of address that. In fact, we recently kind of went back to the drawing board, and we've rather than sort of building all the tax rates into our product, we've created an engine called the Suite Tax. Everything's called Suite at NetSuite.
Yeah.
and that's like a tax engine which we then build all the tax regimes into, and they're constantly updated. So we have advisors all around the world who feed back to us, because of course the challenge with tax is not only is it different in every country, it's constantly changing.
Yeah.
Every time there's a budget, like we had in the UK recently, something changes. So you need to be up to date with all of that. So we get all of that information and advice fed to us. That's built into the engine, and so therefore out of the box, literally, that supports 140 tax regimes, which there's about 200 or so countries or territories around the world. So the majority of them are covered in this kind of one thing. But it's a constant challenge, and it's constantly changing.
The other thing as well that we're seeing now is the live reporting requirements. So your ERP system needs to be connected directly to the government systems. So, and if you don't report within 24 hours, you can get fined.
Is that in the UK?
No. So in the UK, Tax Digital's coming next year, which it's not as strict as that. It's not going to be like almost real time, but in certain European countries, that's the way they're going.
Wow.
So you need to have software that can connect with the tax jurisdictions.
That is an element of it. I mean, in terms of there is quite a lot of anxiety about MTD in the UK, but I mean, some countries are quite far down the road.
They're much further ahead.
Yeah. So in terms of with anxiety over here, I mean, if you want to expand internationally, I would say that there's an element of it has to be done kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And get some good tax advisors to help you through that really understand the transaction flows of your business.
Yeah.
It's one of those things you do have to be open and honest with them, so they really, really do understand your business.
Yeah.
And then when there are changes to your business, or if there are, as you say, if there are changes to legislation, they can pick up the phone and say, this is coming, you need to prepare for it, and these are the implications for your business.
Yeah, and I think, again, just to play devil's advocate, whatever, we can give you a tax engine which allows you to meet all of the tax requirements across the world. That doesn't mean you don't need advice, because of course you should be getting good advice, because your business is going to be different to everybody else's. There'll be opportunities for you to manage your tax better than in different ways. So having the software technology is one thing, but you definitely need that advice. And it is critical, because at the end of the day, they can close your business down. People can go to jail. It's serious stuff.
Yeah. Tim, I understand you've spent quite a lot of time dealing with IP, intellectual property laws. Do you have any battle scars you could show us?
Any battle scars? So I've gone through the process of just ensuring that all of our trademarks are registered in the various countries that we operate in. It's been quite a long, painful process, but it means that we've now got protection in those countries. Going through that process, there's an organisation called WIPO, the World Intellectual Property Organisation, that you can do most of your registrations through that organisation. And again, I would go through an advisor to sort of assist you through that. And you can get registered across most jurisdictions that we work in. There are countries that we operate in that aren't part of that.
Like which countries?
A fair few in the Middle East, which you sort of need to make a call whether you get registered in there, because if it's in WIPO, it's fairly cost effective. If it's outside, it's quite costly. After going through this process, I was amazed. Every month I used to get fake invoices from other organisations that weren't WIPO, charging me registration fees, and then you get an invoice through that says your brand name, and you go, okay, well, this must be a legitimate one, and it's not. It's not at all. So I must have, I was getting to the point of getting, I don't know, 20 invoices through a month
Wow.
for all of our brands.
Wow.
And each one's sort of like 3 or 4 grand. So I sort of like said to my accounts payable clerk, just give them all to me,
Yeah.
and I'll just double check that they're legitimate and correct.
Wow, that's very important.
Yeah.
What's been your experience with intellectual property, David? Do you have any?
Yeah, well, as a software company, intellectual property is always a big issue, and I think all of our customers is the same. We work with a lot of software and tech startups, people who come up with fantastic ideas or products and then want to internationalise. And it's easy to underestimate how much of an overhead it is to do trademarking. So, and all of that protection. So you do need to plan ahead. I think whilst you want to expand really fast, it's really important to have a bit of an idea of where you're going to go and plan that out ahead of time.
I think it just gives you protection. We've had distributors that will start using your logo, and then for whatever reason they might just put your logo on a product that isn't yours.
Yeah.
And that might be a marketing error. Someone just picked it up and assumed it's the same, but actually it's not your product. And then if you've got the trademark there, you can send a cease and desist, and you can speak to them and go, look, it's actually protected by a trademark. There are consequences if you carry on doing this. Which, and you do need that protection as you expand overseas.
Yeah, absolutely. And as soon as you do expand overseas, it's surprising what you will get. So like Tim's invoices, you'll get suddenly companies cropping up with names that are just subtly different to yours, who suddenly appear and
Net site.
Exactly, we've had all of that. It's amazing how much time you end up spending on that sort of stuff. And then you've got to remember, there's basic things like websites and things like that. You've got to decide what's your strategy in terms of, are you going to register your web domain in every country? Because if you are, you want to do that well before you signal that you're going to enter a country, because otherwise you'll find that someone has gone and registered it, and whilst there's better protection now, it's still a pain to have to go through a legal process to try and reclaim a domain or all of that sort of
and
stuff.
So one other thing sort of going through that process is when you're getting a trademark, go for the name and not for a design or logo, because it offers you so much better protection.
Okay.
Because if you decide a couple of years down the line you're going to change your design, then you've no longer got protection.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Yeah. Well, not protection, but you then have to re-register a new trademark.
Yeah, you have to go through it all again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we'll move to the Q&A section. I do see we have a few questions here on the question box. So we'll jump to the questions from the chat window. Oh, I've actually skipped ahead. So, so let's have a look here. So Deb says, we're looking at overseas markets but aren't currently trading abroad. Brexit is a big worry for us. Oh, we've said the Brexit word. We've avoided it so far. Brexit is a big worry for us, and there's so many unknowns. What advice do you have around that?
Well, we're seeing actually Brexit has been a good thing for us, I have to say. Whatever you might think about it, and it's just that companies are realising they need to prepare for the kind of unexpected or the unplanned. So, people are saying we need to get our systems and processes in place so that we can cope with whatever changes happen. And we still don't know what the customs relationship is going to be with the rest of Europe. And what that implications that's going to have with us. But if you can get in place, your systems and processes to be able to deal with that change as quickly as possible, we'd definitely advise that.
Yeah, and I think getting your export documentation right now.
Yeah.
So we're already doing that. We're already trading. So whatever happens, we'll just have to adapt. But because we're going through that process already, hopefully shouldn't be too much of an impact for our business, but certainly just understand what you need to do now in terms of your export documentation to move into international markets.
In terms of what could go wrong if you get any of those documents incorrect, what are we talking about?
So a few years ago, we had an instance where we shipped some goods to a South American country, and the customer was actually unable to pay the duties to take the tanks out of the customs zone, and then we found out that they weren't actually able to pay for the tanks. So all of a sudden we've got quite a large order of tanks that are sat in this port, And it's almost like there's a timer ticking down, because after a certain period of time, the port authorities quarantine the stock and they'll then auction it, and then nobody's getting it back.
Yeah.
So for us to actually recoup it, we had to work with our logistics agency, and then we had to make sure that we got all the documentation redone in our name, so we could then take the stock back, because to clear customs, all the documentation was in the customer's name. So it was a really tricky spot, and you learn, from those almost like horror stories, to make sure that you've worked with a good logistics agency and you've got all your documentation right in the first place, and you know what to do when things go wrong, and you can act quickly.
Yeah. Okay, so yes, guys, get your export documentation correct.
Yeah.
So that's brilliant. We got actually one here from NetSuite from Tony. So how does NetSuite deal with language differences? We have a small subsidiary in China and have to use a local finance bureau for compliance, but as the language is not English, they have to convert it to English for us. Is that something you can help with?
Well, yeah, it's so interesting. So a system, I mean, NetSuite is available in Chinese. In fact, it's our fastest growing market at the moment, not surprisingly. So you can use a system like NetSuite, and your local staff there can use Chinese. However, what you've got to remember is whatever is in the fields in your software, or whatever documents you're using, will be in whatever language it's in, and the system isn't going to translate those. So, if you're going to have export documentation or whatever it is that's product documentation in one language, you are going to have to translate that into another. But in terms of the system, absolutely, you can have users around the world using it in their local language. I think we cover about 24 languages and counting at the moment.
Yeah. Got one here for you, Tim. I have a bit of a worry about our manufacturing firm branching out into less developed countries with issues like corruption. So what measures, is that something you've dealt with, and what measures do you and Western Global take to combat this?
Yeah, okay. So we have obviously all of our policies and procedures in place to do background checks of our suppliers. A fair few of our suppliers are sort of certainly in China, are government backed. So it's really just about doing your homework and then going to visit them as well, and just spending a bit of time with them. Just to really understand, just to make sure it all seems legitimate. Yeah,
that face-to-face element sounds very important.
Yeah, it's very, very important, because you build a relationship with that supplier, and we have some suppliers where we're funding them, so we're critically important to those people, to the point where we have an Indian supplier and we're their main customer. So as we grow, they grow as well, and then when they make investment decisions, it's our responsibility to make sure that we keep on giving them a supply. A few years ago, sort of our CEO went out there, and they had a new line that was put on, and the ceremony cut the ribbon, which was great, and then he got to plant a tree, and like every Western employee that's been to that supplier, every time a new person goes there, they plant a tree at the factory. So yeah, it's vitally important that you have like a good relationship with your suppliers.
Yeah. We've got a question here from Peter. So it all sounds good in theory, but when you're dealing with the complexities of different companies and/or tax regimes around the world, how can you possibly systemize to the granular level of detail that you advocate? Peter with a challenging question.
How can you? I mean, I don't want to sort of imply that it's absolutely dead simple. But as I say, we've created a system now which has inbuilt all of the capabilities to handle those local tax requirements. That isn't to say that it's a press of a button and absolutely dead straightforward. I think you still need to have people either locally or centrally who can advise you and who understand those tax regimes. Because the software can't do everything.
We again on that advisor point, so we have local advisors, excuse me, but we also have UK advisor that's sitting over the top. Tax legislation can be fairly complex, and so when you have overseas teams that are trying to explain to you consequences, it can be quite difficult to understand at times. But if you also have a UK team over the top, if they don't understand it, they'll go back and liaise with their local teams just to really understand what needs to happen.
Yeah. And then one more NetSuite one. So does NetSuite have a specific international tax module?
Yes. That's the Suite Tax module that I referred to.
Perfect. And then I suppose like an observation from someone who actually asked the question earlier is Tony again. So he's saying that if you're anything like our group, you will spend a disproportionate amount of money and time on the setup, compliance, and even closure across different jurisdictions. Your sales and operations people won't have a clue and will walk the business into all sorts of minefields if you let them. So get in early at the bid stage and make sure they hear you. And that's what Tony says. So does that sound about right to you?
Earlier on I was talking about like seeing those quotes come down.
Yeah.
I literally have a look at that quote. Have we got a deposit on it? Is it going to be complicated?
Yeah.
Before we do anything, can we actually deliver it? So
Yeah,
and NetSuite gives us that visibility.
Yes, so the visibility is good, but yeah, we have a sales operation team that spend all their time just monitoring what our salespeople in different territories are actually committing to, and making sure that they don't commit to things that are not what we would want to. Yeah. So yeah, it's a constant. It is a constant problem.
Let's see, one more question. So. Oh, you've got one more question here, so we can deal with this one here, for instance. So, shared services this has been written in some kind of weird parlance. So, shared services center, very local on the ground accounting finance function. So a shared service center, UK versus local on the ground accounting finance function, which is your preferred routes?
Well, I've seen both.
Yeah.
I think shared service centre can be very effective because it does give you, as well as that having a system that is gives you that overall visibility. You have got that greater control. You've got your people sitting, typically in one centre, so you can go and talk to people and all that. So I think if you're at the right scale to do that, I think
the size of business, it makes sense. If we're a small, medium size, my finance manager in the US, she doesn't just do the finances, she does the payroll, she does all the other sort of things as well, so you need
scale. So I think it is an issue of scale. If you're the right size for a shared service centre, definitely you can get the economies of scale, you can get the control and visibility, you can put it in a lower cost location if you want to, if that helps as well.
And so thank you very much for your questions, guys. If there's any questions that I missed, I'll go through them and make sure that any of them are addressed that I've carelessly moved over. And into our final section, which is key takeaways. Key takeaways from Tim and David. Basically, can you give us some of your wisdom? So, in terms of what lessons can Accounting Web viewers today take from all of this? Do you have a silver nugget, Tim, starting with you?
So I think getting good tax advice will pay for itself and save you a lot of headaches. If stuff does go wrong, it takes an awful lot of time to get it right. And I can't sing highly enough of having an ERP system where all of our businesses on the same ERP system with real-time information. That'd be my takeaway.
David?
I would say obviously that what Tim said, but also I'd say try and have a kind of vision for where you're going to be in 3 to 5 years. Don't just think about the sort of the next country or whatever, because I think that will then help you with your planning in terms of your systems and processes. Making sure they're going to be scalable for the sort of foreseeable future, and not just the next 6 or 12 months. I think that then leads into a lot of advantages in terms of the decisions you make.
That's great, guys. That is all that we have time for today. Thank you so much for joining me, Tim. David? My name is Francis Bardenost. I'm the business editor, as I said earlier. Please give us any feedback you have in the comment section that's attached on this page, and use any of the links for further information. And keep an eye on Accounting Web for more finance-related content and news and just general insight and analysis. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Francis Bardenost, as I said. Good day.